Martin Johnson here, guitarist, composer, and arranger for the band Voyager. Welcome to our production video where I will briefly show you how the Voyager album was recorded. But first I need to state something, that the Voyager album was created unconventionally. The album was not recorded in a studio. It was produced at home, which in itself is not unusual. Musicians at all levels record at home now, and they use computer software, and they also mix and master their projects on a variety of speaker systems. That is where I deviated from the beaten path. The system the Voyager album was created and mastered on was, shall we say, unique, and it will be a surprise to some folks. This is the classic Bose 901 speaker, the speaker the so-called audiophiles love to hate. I've seen a number of videos on this topic recently, so I thought it was time for me to present a different perspective. We mixed and mastered the Voyager album using 901 speakers, which I know is unprecedented and sounds crazy. I do understand the differences between 901s and conventional speakers and the controversy involved. I have done a lot of professional studio work, and most studio monitors never seemed adequate. I like a big sound. We all hear sound differently, so I had to prove to myself, as well as anyone else interested, that the Bose 901 system, if properly set up and according to specifications, could serve in this capacity for music production. 901s in a studio application? It's unheard of. That's because of the proprietary 901 system that's been in place since the 60s. I had to prove to myself that my 901s could serve well as a studio monitor. This is how it was done. In 1990, my previous home theater had a pair of 901s. These speakers had been set up properly. For my reference audio source, I used my favorite album, Emerson, Lake & Palmer's Brain Salad Surgery, which to this day is one of the finest engineered rock albums in the history of music. I was impressed with the 901's big sound. Dolby Surround was just happening in 1990. For the center and rear speakers, I chose smaller Bose satellite speakers. I didn't know much about audio at the time, so it seemed to make sense to have some brand commonality in the speakers. Perhaps the smaller Bose models could keep up with the 901s. The shortcomings were evident, so I developed a more ambitious plan. If not set up properly, the 901s sound awful. And sadly, this is common in home theater shops back in the day. This is the critical part that made the 901s an audiophile speaker in the 70s. It was much more than just wires and components. It was speaker placement, and to a degree, the room as well. That is the factor I knew that could be improved. In 2005, we bought a house with an unfinished basement, and this was for the purpose of creating our own home theater and making a crazy dream come true. I proposed building a home theater that has a studio quality environment with a surround system consisting of 6 Bose 901s and a subwoofer to handle the lowest lows the 901s aren't able to replicate, again according to Bose specifications. But was such a system even possible? The 901s are designed for stereo use. I contacted Bose at their Connecticut headquarters through their website email, which was barely interactive in 2005. I never figured I'd get a reply, but I did get a reply the next day. The gentleman responding to my proposal stipulated, as expected, that the 901s were intended for stereo, but if I sent my equipment specs, he would consult with his fellow engineers and get back to me with an answer. I was pleasantly surprised at the service I was receiving. Sure enough, a week later, Bose sent their recommendations and instructions on how to set up a 901 6.1 discrete surround system, and they truly thought it could be done. To their knowledge, it had never been done before, and justifiably should not be done. But they felt it was truly possible. Remember, this was 2005 and I was determined. Bose wanted to be informed on how the project turned out. I purchased 2 more pairs of 901s and set up the gear and started immediate testing. I tested speaker placement and distances between them per Bose specs over many days, and I tested various surfaces to reflect the sound, from old cloth baffles I got from a closed recording studio to wood and drywall. Eventually, I deviated slightly from Bose specifications. I found by placing the 901 speaker's side closer than the prescribed distance from the wall that the sound was not audibly affected. But if I moved the back of the speaker, where most of the energy emits, closer to the wall, the sound grew more intense and unrealistic. From these parameters, I was able to determine the size of the room and design the floor plan from there. I also determined that common particle board resulted in the most realistic sound. Drywall was too brittle. Studio baffles were too muted. I could compensate with settings on the amplifier, but I preferred to do that once the room was completely finished. The theater was christened The Pit. Following the framing stage, 1.25" conduit was run to each station for the large monster cable that would connect each speaker. Particle board panels were mounted behind each speaker position. Then the room was sheetrocked. Texturing blended the wood in with the panels seamlessly. Lots of insulation went into the walls and ceiling to give the theater an audible character. The 901 soundscape was angled to account for the 2 levels of the floor for sound distribution over the theater seating. As soon as the room was functional, more testing followed to confirm construction techniques were effective in establishing a studio-style listening environment. Once the room was 90% completed, I thoroughly studied my amplifier manual, got familiar with internal EQ settings and how to adjust them, and went to work, listening to all sorts of music and making finite adjustments. This chore carried on for days, none of that plug-and-play stuff going on here. I then brought out EOP's brain salad surgery once again, and spent 9 hours setting final parameters within the amplifier, then referencing other highly regarded recordings in a variety of genres. These were minute and very specific internal settings in the Yamaha processor. Final touches on the room included the oak woodwork, storage, screen, and projector. With no components running and holding your breath, the room was dead quiet, save for your heartbeat and maybe the occasional really loud truck roaring by behind the house. The Pit is a retro home theater featuring a JVC turntable, an original first issue Sony DVD player, a Sony VCR, Sony Blu-ray, Roku, various iPod and phones input, and Spotify, and all are input to the Yamaha, which outputs to the 901 equalizers, which then send the signal to the Parasound amplifier, pushing 125 watts per channel, more than enough power for the 901s. The smaller Parasound amplifier sends 45 watts to the 901, handling the rear channel. For low frequencies in films and digital audio recordings, crossover occurs at 35 Hz. These frequencies are handled by a Definitive Technology 15-inch subwoofer. Electrical power is scrubbed by a Panamax power supply conditioner. The Pit premiered to astonished listeners in late 2006. Bose was notified and they responded with a letter of congratulations. To their knowledge, I had a one-of-a-kind home theater at the time. To this day, it continues to amaze people. Extensive preparation went into it, which makes the 901s shine. Folks don't need to go to such lengths to make 901s sound great. But if there is a weakness in the 901 concept, environment and placement would be it. This shortcoming is easily mitigated with careful planning and preparation. The more care put into the listening environment, the more amazing the 901s are. They become part of the environment. A reckless and hasty setup does no good, and the 901s cannot do the job they were created for. Even years later, people remember their listening experience in the pit. They have yet to hear anything that comes close to comparing, and that goes for me and the wife. I would soon have the opportunity to put the pit and the 901s to the most unique and daring test I could think of over the course of 2021. On New Year's Day, a band called Voyager I had played for back in 1984 decided to regroup. We had never recorded an album, and it was the one thing I regretted not doing in my musical career. As producer, I decided to produce the album in the pit, as most studios in our area had long since closed. Our Grammy-nominated engineer, who once owned a studio but had retired, readily agreed to help us out. He also agreed Bose was often maligned by so-called audiophiles, and he thought mixing and mastering on the 901s was a unique idea worth trying. We recorded instruments on click tracks in the pit. The pit's environment proved to be a real asset. Adding to the challenge were 3 songs that were fully orchestrated with an onboard library of instruments which could provide a degree of challenge for mixing. Drums were recorded at our drummer's house in his basement, sparing us the hassle of moving drums and costly repeated setups. For vocals, I fashioned a temporary vocal booth which was effective in capturing our singer's performance without the undesired effect of her voice bouncing off the pit's textured walls. Mixing was done in the pit utilizing the 901s as monitors. Even rough mixes without EQ or mastering compression sounded fabulous, but more importantly, the mixes sounded great on all kinds of other speaker systems. At the time of filming this video, the album was approaching the mastering stage. Mixed singles from the album have been distributed on the internet and through local channels. These are not the same mixes appearing on the album. The music sounds great and the feedback is encouraging. It makes no sense to demonstrate the sound of the pit here. Demonstrations are done this way on YouTube, but the method only demonstrates the recording capability of the equipment being used to make the video. Difference in speaker quality may be apparent, but it is not an accurate representation of the system that is being featured. You can, however, listen to Voyager's music, which was mixed using the 901s. Links are supplied in the description box below. Sound bites can also be heard at the end of this video. We're very happy with the results. The reward was producing a recording utilizing the Series 6 901s that sounds great on any system. Bose gets a bad rap for being successful. The 901 design persisted for nearly 50 years. Few speakers can make that claim, and there's a reason for that. Bose 901s continue to be legendary today. It has been a blessing to mix and master the Voyager album using them. Bottom line is, if you like the sound of your sound system, that's all that matters. The hatred of Bose speakers will continue. The so-called audiophiles' minds will never be changed. If you own Bose speakers, stick to your guns. I did. And I proved to myself and to anyone else interested that the Bose speakers are worthy of what they are doing, and they are worthy in being used as a studio monitor speaker to satisfying results. Thanks for checking out this video on the making of the Voyager album. It's been a long time coming.
remain. They tend to